Hey everyone, this is Chris, your friendly neighborhood Minnesota comic geek, back with a video today talking about great cheap comic books. Before I get started, I would ask that if you enjoy this type of comic book related content, please give the video a thumbs up, hit the notification bell, and subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss any future videos. And if you enjoy talking comics, then comment below. Alright, let's get into it. So as a lifelong comic book reader, collector, I have primarily gravitated towards cheap comic books in my collecting endeavors. I enjoy getting comics for good discounts, usually in the dollar bins, and there are a lot of great comic books that are cheap and accessible to every average person, every average comic book reader, collector type, that go under the radar, in my opinion. And it's usually because they fall somewhere along a long run of comic books that don't necessarily have any major key significance, but that doesn't mean that they aren't great comic books. The first two that you see on screen here are The Incredible Hulk, number 466 and 467, written by Peter David and drawn by Adam Kubert. And these are two of my favorite Incredible Hulk issues. They're more or less standalone issues, but they kind of work in tandem as a kind of two-part story. The first issue here, 466, it has a minor key significance in that it is the death of Betty Ross / Betty Banner, because her and Bruce were married at the time. And I believe she stayed dead until around 2009, I believe, when she was more or less resurrected in the Red Hulk storyline. With both covers here, you get a teaser at what the story is about. They are covers that pique your interest into picking up the book and reading the story to find out what is happening. So starting off with 466 here, you get this very, very small image of the Hulk in relation to the full cover, holding Betty Ross in his arms, and something has clearly gone wrong. You might necessarily know what has happened, but starting off, you immediately find out that Betty has fallen ill with radiation poisoning that I think you learn later down the road, or I think in previous issues, she got a blood transfusion from the Abomination that poisoned her blood. So that's what essentially happens. And throughout I think this story, it's implied that, or Bruce feels like he's to blame for her death. This issue and the next one aren't the stereotypical Hulk stories, in that there's very little actual action and smashing on the Hulk's part outside of this double page spread where he's busted through the wall. It's not that type of story. It's more of a dialogue driven story, but you get two perspectives, or two separate stories happening simultaneously during this issue. And you have what's going on with Betty and Bruce here, but then you also have Marlo Chandler, or Marlo Jones, Rick Jones's wife, reading Betty Ross's kind of memoir or book about her her time and experience with Bruce and the Hulk. And one of the visually impactful and kind of ingenious ways that Adam Kubert depicts both present day versus as opposed to a flashback is where he draws the flashback scenes all in pencil, and they don't get inked, so you get the raw pencil drawings just digitally colored on top of the pencils to juxtapose against the very crisp, clean, inked pencils to show like I said, the juxtaposition of present versus past. And I'm not sure when he started doing this as a storytelling device to show the difference between flashbacks. I think it's an amazing storytelling technique, at least visually, because when reading comics, it can sometimes be tough to know, like, if it's all just inked pages. Pre 2000-ish, it was tough to know without any written signifier, like when you were in a flashback sequence versus a present time sequence. These types of storytelling devices, coupled with the advancement in digital coloring over the last 2+ decades, you can get a very visually clear distinction between the two. Going along in the story, the Hulk is very, very quiet and, again, small. He's not the huge rage monster in a large part of the story. But continuing on, you get some excellent storytelling pacing in the book here, going through the events of Bruce trying to reverse the radiation poisoning. You get this wonderful flashback sequence talking about Betty's experiences with the Hulk, and I love this particular page here because of the Adam Kubert doing his best Dale Keown style. And I'll pop up a picture of the page or panel that I believe he was referencing with this image here, and you can compare the two. Again, continues on. The pacing isn't essentially necessarily fast paced, but you get this wonderful depiction of the events and everything that Bruce tries to go through to save Betty's life, culminating in her dying. And then you get this very quiet last page with these 9 panels tracking the wedding ring that Bruce had given her to hold during this type of treatment, ending with the last panel with her time of death. So again, a very, very good read. And again, it's not the standard Hulk story. Then you go to 467, which takes place roughly 10 years after the events of the previous book of Betty's death, where you're getting Rick Jones retelling the events that happened with Bruce and the Hulk immediately after Betty's death, and he's retelling this story to Peter Parker, who is off panel throughout the entire issue. He just get word balloons saying his dialogue. So I think is another wonderful kind of storytelling device where, as the reader, you're put in the position of Peter Parker, essentially asking Rick Jones to tell you this story. You get Rick's story alongside just visual panels of the events that transpired after. And this story is talking about how Bruce, after Betty's death, kind of attempted to take his own life and commit suicide. The first being almost immediately after, with an empty hypodermic needle. It's a tragic tale of the emotions that Bruce went through after Betty's death, and how they may initially kind of lock him up to kind of protect him from himself. You eventually get to this point where he's talking to Rick, and he's talking about all of these friends and foes that he's talking to, imaginary figments of his imagination of these various characters throughout his life. Continues on. They were keeping him and monitoring him with trank guns trained on him in case he had raised his heart rate and stuff to transform into the Hulk. But in his current state, he figured out how to just instantaneously transform without going through the pain and agony of transforming. And you get this wonderful shot here of the Hulk looking back at Rick with envy in his eyes. There wasn't anger. You get an even tighter shot of that emotion on the Hulk's face. I love this panel because of the close-up, the rendering detail, but just the emotion that you don't regularly see with the Hulk. Envy. It's almost always anger, rage, or a stoicness. The story continues, and he goes through, talks about the multiple attempts that Bruce attempted, and depicting this one where he attempts to jump off the Empire State Building, but he says that Bruce jumped, but the Hulk landed, and just goes on to talk about the war that ensued between Bruce and the Hulk. Then one of the best kind of double page panels in the book is this one, where Adam Kubert really lets the quiet space of like all this negative space and empty space up here, just lets the sadness and the emotion of a funeral play out in both the dialogue and just the visual image. And the choice to put all the figures in silhouette, I think an incredibly smart choice, because it allows you to focus in on Betty's casket and the priest and not get lost in the detail of who all the figures and characters that are at her funeral. Yeah, you can pick a few out, like Mr. Fantastic, Silver Surfer, Human Torch, and Thor, but for the most part, you just, it's an anonymous crowd, but it gives you the impression of how many people Betty has touched in her life. And you just get kind of the quiet kind of end to the story, where Bruce is eventually came to peace with where he was with his emotions and everything, and with Betty's death. It's just it ends with Rick just kind of finishing up the tale, and this was supposedly his last meeting with Bruce. We didn't really see him again, but then you just get these quiet last few full page spreads here. And this one in particular I love because of just how realistic Rick Jones's daughter sitting on his lap looks, and how amazingly Adam Kubert captured her pose. And I have no doubt that he used his own daughter and himself as reference for drawing this page, because I think his daughter was probably around this age when he was working on this book. But it's just a wonderful depiction of a father-daughter moment, where she wants him to stop, finish up the interview so that he can come play with her. But yeah, just a lovely kind of ending to this story and this book, and I believe this might have been Peter David's last issue on the Incredible Hulk, or he was coming to the end of his run for various reasons. But I think it's this book, these last two books, especially, I think are a great love letter to the Hulk as a character beyond just the rage-filled monster. I think there's a lot more depth to the Bruce Hulk dynamic that is, I think, started around in this book. The book ends with an epilogue where it's shown that after Betty died, Thunderbolt Ross, her father, took her body and put her in cryogenic stasis, where, like I said at the beginning of the video, she would stay dead for many years until she was resurrected by the intelligentsia, the leader, and MODOK, using the same process that turned General Ross into the Red Hulk, turned her into the Red She-Hulk. These are great, cheap comic books. I love them. I would highly recommend them. These are books that you can find in every $1 bin that a comic dealer has or comic shops have. I would have no doubt that if you went to your local comic shop now, and if they have a healthy selection of back issues, they probably have these two issues sitting in their Incredible Hulk section. So yeah, these are two great cheap comic books, in my opinion, that anyone can pick up and read and enjoy the story. And like I said, I highly recommend them. So, let me know in the comments below. Do you have these issues? Do you like them? Have you read them? What are your thoughts on these two issues, the kind of two-issue story arc here? With that, I will end this little discussion. Thanks for watching, and again, if you enjoyed this type of comic book related content, please give the video a thumbs up, hit the notification bell, and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, comment below and let's talk some comics. Bye.